This little chat is about preparing to cast a spell, any spell. How do we go about it? If we've suddenly decided there is something we must do because we want to cast a spell, which is very important to us, how do we go about creating this spell? What do we do? Well, I would say don't go rushing for a spell book. That's one of the first things. Give yourself a few moments and stop and think, what do I want? And then I would go and get your notebook, your magical journal, your book of shadows, or just a plain ordinary notebook where you write your spells. Just as some people write their knitting patterns, you write your spells. And as you can hear, Mabel is still snoring. She must have some very happy dreams, I think. So you get your notebook, you get your pen or pencil, and you start jotting things down. I tend to like using pen and paper best because when you type on a computer, you're typing away, but when you write, somehow it's actually flowing out of you in a different sort of way. It was my feeling anyway. I write better spells that way, so I just pass that on as a bit of a suggestion. So you begin to think, well, what do I want? That's the first thing. What is it I want? And then, equally important, think, what is it I don't want? Because that's important too. And then you think to yourself, now, what could go wrong with this spell? Now, lots of things can go wrong with spells. Sorry, I'm itching like this. I've got a long bit of hair, keeps coming down and tickling the bottom of my nose. I do apologise. What can actually go wrong? Well, lots of things go wrong with spells. And in my own experience, when things go wrong, it's because we haven't thought it out properly. I know I've run spellcasting classes many years ago, and you'd have people where something would go wrong and they'd come back and say, it was all wrong, it didn't come out the way I wanted. And you're like, well, what did you do? And you go through it and you say, now, wait a minute, this is a bit ambiguous. In other words, it could mean one thing or the other. Oh, yes, but, it knows what I want, they would say. That's not what I wanted. And you think, oh, no, but that's what you wrote. That's the spell you did. And it's one reason I don't cast spells for other people, because it has a terrible propensity to go wrong. So get your thoughts together. Don't be in a rush. That's another one. Please don't be in a hurry to cast a spell. It's not a good idea. Write your spell down, bits and pieces. You don't have to write a lot. It doesn't even have to rhyme. It is good if you get a nice little rhythm going with it, but that's up to you. You know what it is feels best for you. The other thing I feel where a lot of people go wrong, and I've seen it happen where young people are watching older witches and that doing a ritual or a spell, and you can see they're being terribly impressed by it all the robes, all the chanting, waving their arms about, And to be honest, you don't need any of it. I always say a good witch can get by with her breath and her intention. That's it. Don't need anything else. It's nice if you want to, but please don't feel you have to rush out and buy yourself a beautiful cloak in order to cast your spell. You don't need it at all. Most people, when I'm around, they don't even know I'm doing a spell. No need to. And yet, the funny thing is, they know in a way that I am a witch. It's quite funny with my grandson the other day. He was talking about someone and he said, she sounds just like a witch in one of those films. And I said, well, I'm a witch. Oh, yes, he said, I know, but you're not in films yet. I like the yet on the end. It's lovely. So we try and we put things together. So if you have a spell you want to do, what I would suggest is get your pen and paper and start putting it together. And then think what it is you need. You don't need things to represent fire, earth, air and water. If you want to, and if it's meaningful to you, great, do it. But don't feel because you can't, perhaps because you're trying to cast a spell in a public place, which is always tricky, but not impossible. Don't feel that you have to do anything just because other people do it. It doesn't work like that. So give that a go and try it. Set up your spell. That's what we're doing today. We're setting up a spell. See how you get on. And if you can get on with it well, that's great. If you find it difficult, well, don't worry. Just cross through your piece of paper. Don't rip it up, because you might want to come back to it one day and say, oh, that didn't work for that spell, but it might work for this new one. See? So give it a go. See what you can do. And as I said, don't be too influenced by what others do. Don't be too influenced by the colour, the spectacle, the noise, the drumming. It doesn't mean anything. It's a bit like in these cathedrals where you see a service being held and everybody's all dressed up in their garments, their vestments, their embroidered cloths over the altar. They've got bells, they've got choirs, they've got incense they're swinging around and all that. It doesn't make it more meaningful. In fact, some terrible things have gone on in these particular churches and that. So you don't necessarily want to do it. That's not necessarily a good thing. You can become bewitched. It's a good word for us, isn't it? You can become bewitched and dazzled. And you really don't want to be dazzled. Don't let that happen to you. It's not good. So I shall finish here. Have a good think about it. See what you do with your spells. And then hopefully I'll do another one of these videos at some point. And anyway, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.